The Velkari Empire had ruled the stars for 3,000 years. Their ships were beautiful things made of silver metal and glowing blue lights. They moved through space like dancers, smooth and perfect. No other species had ever challenged them. No other species had ever come close. Commander Zethral stood on the bridge of his observation vessel, the Luminance. He was tall and thin, with gray skin and 4 yellow eyes that could see in many directions at once. His job was simple. He traveled to distant star systems and looked for new life. In his long career, he had found 17 primitive civilizations. Most were still burning wood for fire. None were a threat. None were interesting. Today was supposed to be another boring patrol near the outer rim of known space. His crew was relaxed. Some were playing games. Others were sleeping. The universe was quiet and safe, just as it had always been. Then the sensors started beeping. Zethral looked at his screen. Something was moving behind a large gas giant planet nearby. The energy readings were strange. They did not match any known Velkari technology. They did not match any technology he had ever seen. He ordered his crew to hide the ship behind a small moon. They would watch and wait. They would see what emerged from behind that giant planet. What came next changed everything Zethral believed about the universe. Ships appeared. Not 1 or 2, but 17 of them. They were not beautiful. They were not elegant. They were ugly. Angular things, covered in thick metal plates. Their hulls were black and gray, marked with burns and dents and deep scars. Some of them had holes that had been patched with different colored metal. They looked like they had been through a war. They looked like they should not still be flying, but they were flying. They moved together in tight formation, protecting each other like a pack of wounded animals. At the center of the formation was the largest ship. It was nearly 2 kilometers long, a massive thing of brutal design. Strange symbols covered its hull. On the side, Zethral could see words in an unknown language. His computer translated them slowly. USS Indomitable. Zethral had never seen anything like it. His people built ships to be perfect. They replaced any part that showed wear. They would never fly a vessel that looked so damaged. Yet these ships moved with confidence. Their crews knew what they were doing. He opened a channel to the Velkari High Council. His message was urgent. A new species had entered their space. They appeared to be warriors. They appeared to be dangerous. The council replied within minutes. They wanted more information. They wanted to know everything about these strange visitors. On board the USS Indomitable, Admiral Katie Morrison stood on her bridge with a cup of coffee in her hand. She was 53 years old, with short gray hair and tired eyes that had seen too much death. She had been fighting for 7 years. 7 years of running, hiding, and striking back against an enemy that never stopped hunting them. The enemy was called the Nexus Collective. They were machines, cold and logical and endless. They did not negotiate. They did not show mercy. They simply consumed everything in their path, adding the resources of each conquered world to their ever-growing fleet. Humanity had met them by accident. A research vessel had stumbled into Nexus space and been destroyed. The machines had followed the ship's trail back to human territory. What followed was a nightmare. Colony after colony fell. Billions died. The survivors gathered what ships they could and ran. Admiral Morrison had led the retreat. 17 ships remained from a fleet that had once numbered over 200. They had fought the Nexus at every turn, buying time for civilian transports to escape, sacrificing themselves piece by piece to keep humanity alive. Now they had traveled farther than any human had gone before. They had hoped to find safety. Instead, they had found another alien civilization. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Park stood beside the Admiral, his fingers moving across his control panel. He was young, only 31, but he had aged decades in the past 7 years. His face was thin and his hands sometimes shook, but his mind was sharp. "Admiral, the alien ship is scanning us," he reported. "They are hiding behind that moon, but our sensors can see them clearly." Morrison nodded slowly. She took a sip of her coffee. It was cold, but she did not care. Let them look. We have nothing to hide. Should we try to communicate? Not yet. Let them make the first move. We do not know if they are friendly or hostile. We do not know anything about them. She turned to look at her bridge crew. They were exhausted. All of them. Lieutenant Megan Torres sat at the tactical station, her red hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had been a schoolteacher before the war. Now she was one of the best combat officers in the fleet. Chief Engineer Scott Bradley was monitoring the ship's systems from his station. He had kept the Indomitable running with spare parts, creative thinking, and prayers. Dr. Nathan Cole stood near the back of the bridge, ready to help if anyone collapsed from exhaustion or stress. It happened more often than anyone liked to admit. These people had given everything for this mission. They deserved rest. They deserved peace. Morrison hoped this new species would give them a chance to find it. The alien ship finally moved. It emerged from behind the moon and approached slowly, its blue lights blinking in what might have been a greeting or a warning. Morrison could not tell. Her communications officer reported an incoming transmission. Alien voices filled the bridge, speaking in clicks and hums that made no sense. The computer worked quickly, analyzing patterns and building a basic translation. After several minutes, words appeared on the screen. Unknown vessels. You have entered Velkari space. Identify yourselves and state your purpose. Morrison set down her coffee. She straightened her uniform, even though the aliens could not see her. Old habits died hard. This is Admiral Katie Morrison of the United Earth Fleet, she said clearly. We are refugees. We are running from an enemy that destroyed our home. We mean you no harm. We are simply looking for a safe place to rest and repair our ships. There was a long pause. Then the alien voice returned. Your ships are damaged. Your fleet is small. Yet you have traveled very far. How have you survived? Morrison smiled, though there was no joy in it. We are human. Surviving is what we do. The alien ship hung in space, watching them. Zethral stared at his screen, trying to understand what he was seeing. These creatures had crossed half the galaxy in broken ships, running from some terrible enemy. They should be dead. By every logical calculation, they should have perished long ago. But they were alive. They were still fighting. He did not know whether to fear them or admire them. Perhaps both. He sent another message to the High Council. This species was unlike anything the Velkari had ever encountered. They were not primitive. They were not weak. They were something new, something dangerous, something wonderful. 3 days passed before the Velkari agreed to meet the humans face to face. The High Council debated for hours about the risks. Some believed it was too dangerous. Others believed it was necessary. In the end, curiosity won. They needed to understand these strange visitors. Ambassador Velnira was chosen to lead the diplomatic mission. She was experienced and calm, with pale blue skin and 6 delicate fingers on each hand. She had negotiated with many species before, though most of them had been primitive and easily impressed by Velkari technology. She expected this meeting to be similar. She was wrong. Her shuttle docked with the USS Indomitable, and the airlock opened with a hiss of pressurized air. Velnira stepped through with 4 security guards behind her. What she saw made her stop in her tracks. The corridor was functional, nothing more. The walls were bare metal, painted in dull gray. Pipes and wires ran along the ceiling, exposed for easy repair. The floor was scratched and worn from countless boots walking across it. This was not a ship designed for beauty. This was a ship designed to survive. But what caught her attention were the marks on the walls. Burn marks. Blast marks. Places where weapons had torn through metal, and where new metal had been welded to cover the holes. The patches were obvious, made from different materials that did not quite match. Some were darker, some were lighter. Some had strange symbols from other species entirely. A human officer met them at the airlock. He was a tall man with brown skin and a warm smile. His uniform was clean but faded, and he walked with a slight limp. Ambassador Velnira, welcome aboard. I am Lieutenant Commander Ryan Park. Admiral Morrison asked me to give you a tour of our ship before you meet with her. Velnira nodded slowly. Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. I admit, your vessel is very different from ours. Park laughed softly. I imagine it is. We have not had time for fancy decorations. Most of our effort goes into keeping the ship running. He led them through the corridors, pointing out different areas as they walked. The crew members they passed nodded politely and continued with their work. Velnira noticed something about them. Many had scars. Some were missing fingers or limbs, replaced with mechanical parts. One young woman had a burn mark covering half her face. Yet they all moved with purpose. They all seemed determined. Your crew has suffered many injuries, Velnira observed. Yes, Park said simply. War does that. They reached the medical bay, and Park introduced them to Dr. Nathan Cole. The doctor was a thin man with gentle eyes and steady hands. He was treating a patient when they arrived, carefully stitching a wound on a young man's arm. Sorry for the mess, Cole said without looking up. We had a small accident in engineering this morning. Nothing serious. Solo, Velnira looked around the medical bay. It was crowded with beds, and many of them were occupied. Medical equipment beeped and hummed, some of it clearly modified from its original design. Doctor, may I ask you a question? She said. Of course. How long has your fleet been running from this enemy you spoke of? Cole finished his stitching and finally looked at her. His eyes were tired, but there was strength in them. 7 years. Ambassador. We have been fighting and running for 7 years. Velnira could not hide her shock. 7 years? That is impossible. No fleet could survive that long against a superior enemy. Cole smiled sadly. And yet, here we are. Park led them to the engine room next. Chief Engineer Scott Bradley met them at the door. He was a large man with thick arms and grease stains on his hands. His uniform was torn in several places, patched with rough stitches. Welcome to my kingdom, he said with a grin. Try not to touch anything. Half of it is held together with hope and prayers. The engine room was a maze of machinery that made no sense to Velnira. She saw human technology mixed with parts that were clearly alien. Some components looked new. Others looked ancient. Wires of different colors ran in every direction, connecting systems that should not work together. This is remarkable, she admitted. How do you maintain such a complex system? Bradley shrugged. We make do with what we have. When something breaks, we find a way to fix it. When we run out of parts, we build new ones. When we find alien technology, we figure out how to use it. He pointed to a panel on the far wall. That right there is from a Nexus ship we destroyed 2 years ago. Took us 6 months to understand how it worked. Now it gives us 30% more power to our shields. You use your enemy's technology? Of course. They tried to kill us with it. Seems fair that we use it to survive. Velnira's security guards exchanged nervous glances. This was not how civilized species behaved. The Velkari would never use salvaged enemy parts in their ships. It was considered primitive and dangerous. Yet these humans did it without hesitation. The tour continued to the tactical center, where Lieutenant Megan Torres was running combat simulations with her team. She was a small woman, with sharp green eyes and quick movements. Her fingers danced across control panels as she spoke. Ambassador, welcome. Sorry I cannot stop to chat. We are preparing for the possibility that the Nexus followed us here. You believe they tracked you to our space? Torres nodded grimly. The Nexus never stops hunting. They are machines. They do not forget. They do not forgive. If there is any chance they can find us, they will take it. And if they come? Torres looked at her directly. Then we fight. It is all we know how to do. Finally, Park led them to the bridge, where Admiral Morrison waited. She stood straight despite her obvious exhaustion. Her gray hair neatly combed, and her uniform pressed. Ambassador Velnira, thank you for coming. I hope the tour was informative. It was remarkable, Velnira admitted. I have never seen anything like your ship or your crew. By every measure, you should not have survived this long. Morrison nodded. We get that a lot. How do you do it? How do you keep fighting when everything is against you? The Admiral thought for a moment before answering. Because the alternative is dying. And we are not ready to die yet. We have families waiting for news. We have friends who sacrificed themselves so we could keep going. We have a duty to survive, not just for ourselves, but for everyone who did not make it this far. She stepped closer to Velnira, her eyes serious. Ambassador, I will be honest with you. My fleet is tired. My ships are damaged. My crew has given everything they have. We need rest. We need supplies. We need a safe place to repair and recover. I am not asking for charity. We will work for anything you give us. But I am asking for a chance. Velnira studied the human admiral for a long moment. She saw the lines on her face, the weight on her shoulders, the determination in her eyes. This was a leader who had carried her people through impossible circumstances. I will speak with the High Council, Velnira said finally. I cannot promise anything, but I will tell them what I have seen here today. That is all I ask. As the Velkari delegation returned to their shuttle, Velnira found herself thinking about everything she had witnessed. These humans were not like any species she had encountered before. They were rough and primitive in some ways, but there was something else in them. Something fierce. Something unbreakable. She did not know if they were allies or threats. But she knew one thing for certain. The Velkari would never forget the day they met humanity. The Velkari High Council met in the great chamber of their capital world. 12 leaders sat in a circle of floating chairs, their gray robes flowing around them like water. Holographic screens displayed images of the human fleet, the damaged ships hanging in space like wounded birds. Ambassador Velnira stood in the center of the circle, presenting her report. She spoke for 3 hours, describing everything she had seen on the human vessel, the scars on the walls, the determination in the crew's eyes, the strange mixture of technology that somehow worked together. When she finished, the chamber fell silent. Counselor Methcon was the first to speak. He was old, with wrinkled skin and clouded eyes that still saw more than most. These humans are dangerous. They come from a war we do not understand. They bring violence to our peaceful space. We should send them away before they cause us problems. Send them where? Asked Counselor Rethvan, a younger leader known for his open mind. They have nowhere to go. Their home is destroyed. Their people are scattered across the stars. If we turn them away, we condemn them to death. That is not our concern, Methcon replied coldly. The Velkari Empire has survived for 3,000 years by avoiding conflicts. We do not involve ourselves in the wars of others. Perhaps that is exactly the problem, Velnira said softly. The council members turned to look at her. She knew she was speaking out of turn, but she could not stay silent. I have studied our history, she continued. I know how we have dealt with threats in the past. When the Nexus Collective first appeared 2 centuries ago, we did not fight them. We simply declared their territory off limits. We drew a line on our maps and pretended they did not exist. And that strategy has worked, Methcon said firmly. They have not attacked us. They have not attacked us yet. But they have consumed 12 civilizations, 12 entire species, gone forever. And we did nothing to stop it. Silence fell over the chamber again. It was an uncomfortable truth that few Velkari liked to discuss. Counselor Rethvan leaned forward in his chair. Ambassador, what do you suggest we do? Velnira took a deep breath. I suggest we listen to the humans. They have fought the Nexus for 7 years. They know things about this enemy that we do not. If the machines ever turn their attention to us, we will need that knowledge. The debate continued for 4 more days. Some counselors wanted to help the humans. Others wanted to send them away. A few even suggested destroying them before they could become a threat. The arguments went back and forth, growing more heated with each passing hour. Then the news arrived. A patrol ship at the edge of Velkari space had detected unusual energy signatures. When they investigated, They found Nexus scout vessels mapping the area. The machines had followed the humans. They had found Velkari territory. Panic spread through the council chamber. This was the moment they had always feared. The enemy they had ignored for 2 centuries was now at their door. Admiral Morrison was summoned to speak before the council. She arrived in her worn uniform, her boots clicking on the polished floor. She looked small compared to the tall Velkari around her, but she stood straight and spoke clearly. "Honored Council, I know you are afraid. You have every right to be. The Nexus Collective is the most dangerous enemy I have ever faced. They do not feel fear. They do not feel mercy. They simply calculate the most efficient way to destroy you, and then do it." She paused, looking at each council member in turn. "My fleet led them here. That is our fault, and we take responsibility for it. If you want us to leave, we will. We will fly back into the darkness and try to draw them away from your space, but I do not think that will work. The Nexus has found you now. They will not forget. They will not stop. Eventually, they will come for you whether we are here or not." Counselor Methken spoke harshly. "Then what do you suggest, human? Should we simply wait to die? No, I suggest you fight." The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Fight? The Velkari had not fought a real war in over 1,000 years. Their military was mostly ceremonial, designed for patrols and small conflicts. They had no experience against a true enemy. Morrison raised her hand for silence. To her surprise, the council quieted. "I know you think fighting is impossible. I know you believe the Nexus cannot be stopped. But you are wrong. They can be hurt. They can be slowed. They can even be beaten, if you are willing to pay the price." "What price?" asked Counselor Rethvan. "Everything," Morrison said simply. "That is what war costs. It takes everything you have, your resources, your comfort, your people. It grinds you down until you think you have nothing left. And then, it asks for more." She stepped closer to the center of the circle. "But here is the secret that the Nexus does not understand. They think that when they take everything from you, you will give up. They think that logic will prevail, that you will calculate the odds and surrender. But that is not how life works. That is not how we work." Her voice grew stronger. "When you take everything from a living being, you do not get surrender. You get anger. You get determination. You get a creature that has nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. The Nexus has taken our homes, our families, our future, and in return, they have created an enemy that will never stop hunting them." She looked directly at Methkan. "You can face the Nexus with your perfect ships and your careful strategies. Maybe you will win. Maybe you will last longer than the 12 species that came before you. Or you can let us stand beside you. We are not pretty. We are not elegant. We are scarred and tired and held together with patches and prayers. But we know how to fight. We know how to survive. And we know how to make the machines bleed." The chamber was silent for a long moment. Then Counselor Rethvan spoke. "How do you make machines bleed? They do not have blood." Morrison allowed herself a small smile. "That is exactly what they think. But everything has a weakness. Everything can be hurt. You just have to be creative enough to find the way." The council debated through the night. By morning, they had reached a decision. The Velkari would not run. They would not hide. For the first time in their long history, they would stand and fight, and they would not fight alone. Admiral Morrison received the news on her bridge, surrounded by her tired crew. When the message came through, there was no cheering, no celebration. They had been through too much for that, but there was relief, and there was hope. Lieutenant Torres looked up from her station. "Admiral, the Velkari are asking how they can help." Morrison set down her cold coffee and straightened her uniform. "Tell them to send us their best engineers. We have a lot to teach them, and not much time to do it." Outside the viewport, the stars glittered like diamonds against the black void of space. Somewhere out there, the Nexus was gathering its forces. The machines were coming. But for the first time in 7 years, Admiral Katie Morrison felt something she had almost forgotten: hope. The humans were no longer alone. The Nexus arrived 3 weeks later, exactly as Admiral Morrison had predicted. Their fleet emerged from deep space in perfect formation. 200 vessels of cold metal and calculating intelligence. They did not send messages. They did not make demands. They simply advanced toward Valkyrie Prime, the heart of the Empire. The Valkyrie defense fleet moved to intercept. 120 ships, silver and elegant, formed a defensive line between the enemy and their homeworld. Their commanders had studied human tactics for weeks, learning everything they could about the Nexus. But studying was not the same as experiencing. The machines struck first. Blue energy beams lanced across space, cutting through Valkyrie shields like knives through paper. Ships exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Others spun away, damaged and helpless. The Nexus did not celebrate or pause. They simply recalculated and struck again. Within the first hour, the Valkyrie lost 30 ships. Admiral Morrison watched the battle from the bridge of the Indomitable, her jaw tight. Beside her, Lieutenant Commander Park tracked the enemy movements on his screen. "The Valkyrie are falling back," he reported. "Their formation is breaking." Morrison nodded grimly. She had expected this. The Valkyrie were brave, but they had never faced an enemy like the Nexus. Their perfect tactics and elegant maneuvers meant nothing against machines that learned from every engagement. "Signal the fleet," she said quietly. "It is time." The human ships moved forward like wolves emerging from the shadows. 17 vessels, battered and scarred, formed a wedge at the center of the battle line. The Indomitable led the charge, its massive hull absorbing the first wave of enemy fire. The Nexus reacted immediately. They had faced these humans before. They knew how dangerous they could be. Half the machine fleet turned to engage the new threat. Morrison smiled. That was exactly what she wanted. "All ships, execute Pattern 7. Let us show them what we have learned." The human fleet scattered in what appeared to be chaos. Ships broke formation, diving in different directions, weaving between asteroids and debris. The Nexus struggled to track them all. Their logical minds expected organized movements and predictable patterns. Instead, they got madness. The Defiant Hope, commanded by Captain Derek Simmons, led a group of 3 cruisers directly into the enemy formation. They fired their weapons at close range, targeting engine systems and communication arrays. The Nexus ships tried to regroup, but the humans were already moving, sliding past them like ghosts. Nexus command ship identified. Torres reported from her tactical station. "It is the large vessel at the center of their formation. If we destroy it, we can disrupt their coordination." "Can we reach it?" Morrison asked. "Not with conventional tactics. Their defenses are too strong." Captain Simmons' voice crackled over the communication system. "Admiral, the Defiant Hope can reach it, but it will be a one-way trip." Morrison closed her eyes for a moment. She knew what he was offering. She hated it. But she also knew there was no other choice. "Derek, are you sure? My crew is already evacuating to escape pods. We have 5 minutes before the Nexus realizes what we are doing. Permission to ram the enemy vessel." There was silence on the bridge. Everyone knew what this meant. Everyone understood the cost. "Permission granted," Morrison said softly. "Godspeed, Captain." "Thank you, Admiral. It has been an honor." Simmons out. The Defiant Hope accelerated toward the Nexus command ship. Enemy vessels tried to intercept, but the other human ships blocked them, creating a corridor of fire and chaos. The cruiser pushed through, its shields failing, its hull burning, but still moving forward. In the final seconds, Captain Simmons activated the ship's self-destruct sequence. The Defiant Hope hit the Nexus command ship at full speed, and the explosion was visible across the entire battlefield. For a moment, the Nexus fleet stopped. Their coordination faltered. Their perfect formation broke apart as individual ships struggled to operate without central guidance. "Now," Morrison ordered, "hit them with everything we have." The combined fleet struck. Valkyrie and human ships fought side by side, their weapons tearing into the confused enemy. The battle became a storm of energy beams, missiles, and burning metal. Lieutenant Torres coordinated a squadron of fighters that used the debris from destroyed ships as cover. They darted out, delivered precision strikes, and vanished again before the Nexus could respond. Dr. Cole worked aboard a shuttle that had been converted into a mobile hospital. He flew into the heart of the battle, pulling wounded crew members from damaged ships. It did not matter if they were human or Velkari. If they were alive, he saved them. Chief Engineer Bradley kept the Indomitable running through sheer willpower. Systems failed constantly, and he repaired them constantly. His hands were burned. His face was covered in ash. But he never stopped working. The battle lasted 18 hours. By the end, the Nexus fleet was shattered. Only 40 of their ships remained, and they were retreating into the darkness of deep space. The machines had been defeated, but victory came at a terrible price. 87 Velkari ships had been destroyed. Thousands of their crew members were dead or missing. Their homeworld had almost fallen to an enemy they had ignored for centuries. The humans lost 9 ships. Every surviving vessel was damaged. The Indomitable itself had holes in its hull and was venting atmosphere from 3 different sections, but they were still flying. Commander Zethral, who had first discovered the human fleet, had watched the battle from his observation vessel. He had seen things that would haunt his dreams for years. He had seen humans fly into certain death without hesitation. He had seen them risk their lives to save Velkari escape pods. He had seen them refuse to surrender, even when all hope seemed lost. Now he walked through the corridors of the Indomitable, stepping over debris and avoiding repair crews. The ship was a mess. The air smelled of smoke and burning metal, yet the humans were already working, patching holes, replacing wires, preparing for the next fight. He found Admiral Morrison on the observation deck, staring out at the battlefield. Pieces of destroyed ships floated past the window, some of them still burning. "Admiral," he said softly, "the Velkari High Council has asked me to deliver a message." She turned to look at him. Her eyes were red from exhaustion, and there was blood on her sleeve that might not have been her own. "What is the message?" "They wish to thank you. Your fleet saved our homeworld. Without your help, we would have been destroyed." Morrison shook her head. "We did not save you. We fought beside you. There is a difference. Your people showed courage today. They stood their ground when they could have run. That is something the Nexus cannot take away." Zethral was silent for a moment. "We also lost many ships, many lives. Some of my people are questioning whether the cost was worth it." Was it? He thought about the question carefully. Before today, we had never fought a real war. We did not know what it felt like. Now we do. He paused. "It is terrible. It is painful. It is something I hope we never have to do again." "But," Morrison prompted, "but we are still here. Our homeworld is still safe. Our people are still alive. And the Nexus knows that we can hurt them. That we are not easy prey." He looked at her with his 4 yellow eyes. "Yes, Admiral, it was worth it." Morrison nodded slowly. She turned back to the window, watching the stars. "Captain Simmons had a family," she said quietly. "A wife and 2 daughters. They escaped on a refugee transport 3 years ago. We lost contact with them last year. He never knew if they were still alive." Zethral did not know what to say. He flew his ship into that command vessel knowing he would never find out. He did it anyway. Because that is what humans do. We sacrifice ourselves for each other. For people we have never met. For a future we might never see. She turned to face him one last time. "That is why we are still here, Commander. That is why we will always be here. No matter how many times the universe tries to destroy us." Outside the window, the first rays of sunlight from Velkari Prime's star began to illuminate the battlefield. A new day was dawning. The war was not over. The Nexus would return. But for now, there was victory. And there was hope. 6 months passed after the Battle of Velkari Prime. The human fleet remained in orbit around the alien homeworld, slowly repairing their damaged ships. What had once been 17 vessels was now 8. Some had been destroyed in the battle. Others had been stripped for parts to keep the remaining ships flying, but the humans did not complain. They had survived. That was enough. The Velkari worked alongside them, learning everything they could about human engineering and tactics. At first, they had been confused by the messy, improvised nature of human technology. Their own ships were precise and elegant, built according to perfect specifications. The idea of mixing different systems together seemed wrong to them. But slowly, they began to understand. Chief Engineer Bradley spent hours teaching Velkari engineers how to repair systems with whatever materials were available. He showed them how to adapt enemy technology for their own use. He taught them that perfection was nice, but survival was more important. "Your ships are beautiful," he told them one day, gesturing at a Velkari cruiser docked nearby. "Really? They are. But beauty does not win wars. Stubbornness wins wars. The ability to keep fighting when everything is broken wins wars." Lieutenant Torres trained their combat pilots in new tactics. She taught them to be unpredictable, to take risks, to trust their instincts instead of their computers. "The Nexus learns from patterns," she explained. "If you always do the same thing, they will figure out how to stop you. But if you change constantly, if you do things that do not make logical sense, you confuse them. And confused machines make mistakes." Dr. Cole worked in the Velkari hospitals, sharing his knowledge of trauma medicine. He had treated more battle injuries than any Velkari doctor could imagine. His experience was valuable, even if his methods sometimes seemed crude compared to their advanced technology. "Sometimes you do not have time for perfect healing," he said gently to a young Velkari surgeon. "Sometimes you just need to stop the bleeding and keep them alive long enough to reach better care." That is the first lesson of war medicine. Perfect is the enemy of good enough. Admiral Morrison met regularly with the High Council, planning for the future. The Nexus would return. Everyone knew that. The machines did not forget defeats. They learned from them. The next attack would be stronger, smarter, more dangerous. "We need to prepare," she told them. "Not just your people, but all the species in this region of space. The Nexus will not stop with you. They will keep expanding until there is nothing left to consume." Counselor Rethvan nodded thoughtfully. "You are suggesting an alliance. Multiple species working together against a common enemy." "Yes, alone we fall. Together, we have a chance." It was a radical idea. The Velkari had always kept to themselves, avoiding entanglement with other civilizations. But the battle had changed them. They had seen what cooperation could achieve. They had seen humans and Velkari fighting side by side, saving each other's lives without hesitation. The Council agreed to reach out to neighboring species. It would take time to build trust, to create a true alliance. But it was a start. Commander Zethral continued to visit the Indomitable regularly. He had developed a strange respect for the humans, despite their differences. They were loud and emotional, where Velkari were quiet and calm. They made jokes in the middle of serious situations. They ate strange foods and played strange games and sometimes broke into song for no apparent reason. But they were also brave and loyal and determined. They never gave up on each other. They never stopped fighting for what they believed in. One evening, he found Admiral Morrison alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars as she often did. Her coffee cup was empty beside her, and her eyes were distant. "Admiral," he said softly, "may I join you?" She nodded without looking away from the window. "Of course, Commander." He stood beside her in silence for a moment, following her gaze to the distant stars. Somewhere out there, the Nexus was rebuilding. Somewhere out there, other species were living their lives, unaware of the danger approaching. Somewhere out there, the universe continued its endless dance of creation and destruction. "I have been thinking about our first meeting," Zethral said finally. "When I saw your fleet emerge from behind that gas giant, I did not know what to make of you. And now I still do not know what to make of you." He paused. "But I am glad you came." Morrison smiled slightly. "So are we, Commander. May I ask you something personal?" "Of course. Do you ever regret it? The fighting? The sacrifice? The endless war against an enemy that seems impossible to defeat? Morrison was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft, but steady. Every day. I regret every life we have lost. Every ship that burned. Every family that was torn apart. I carry those regrets with me like stones in my pocket. They never get lighter. She turned to look at him. But I do not regret fighting. I do not regret standing up when we could have surrendered. I do not regret being here. With your people. Building something new. She smiled. You asked me once how we survive. The truth is, we survive because we choose to. Every single day, we make the choice to keep going. To keep hoping. To keep believing that tomorrow might be better than today. Zethral considered her words carefully. That seems like a heavy burden. It is. But it is also a gift. The ability to hope, even when hope seems foolish. The ability to love, even when love might lead to loss. The ability to fight, even when fighting seems pointless. She shrugged. These are the things that make life worth living. The Nexus will never understand that. They see only numbers and calculations. They do not see what makes us strong. And what is that? Each other, Morrison said simply. We are stronger together. Not because we are perfect or powerful or clever, but because we care about each other. Because we refuse to let each other fall. The formal alliance ceremony took place 2 weeks later. The High Council gathered in their great chamber, surrounded by holographic displays and floating platforms. Representatives from 3 neighboring species attended as observers, curious about this new development. Admiral Morrison stood before the council, her worn uniform pressed and clean for the occasion. Behind her stood the surviving officers of the human fleet. Park, Torres, Bradley, Cole, and dozens of others who had fought and bled and survived. Councillor Rethvan read the formal declaration. The Velcari Empire and the United Earth Fleet would stand together as equals. They would share knowledge and resources. They would defend each other against any threat. They would build a future together. When the declaration was signed, there was no cheering. No celebration. Both species had lost too much for that. But there was something else. A sense of connection. A sense of purpose. A sense that the universe had changed forever. Morrison shook hands with Rethvan, the human gesture feeling strange to his 6-fingered hand. But he did it anyway, because that was what allies did. Thank you, he said quietly, for everything. Thank you for giving us a chance, she replied. That is all we ever wanted. The human fleet departed Velcari space 1 month later, their ships repaired and restocked. They were going back to the war, back to the endless fight against the Nexus Collective, but this time, they were not alone. 40 Velcari vessels flew with them, crewed by volunteers who had chosen to join the fight. They were not warriors by nature. They were scientists and engineers and explorers, but they had learned something important from the humans. They had learned that sometimes, the only way to protect what you love is to stand up and fight for it. Commander Zethral watched from his observation vessel as the combined fleet disappeared into the darkness between stars. His 4 yellow eyes tracked them until they were gone, vanished into the endless void. He thought about everything he had seen since that first day. The damaged ships, the scarred crew, the stubborn determination that defied all logic. He thought about Admiral Morrison and her cold coffee and her tired eyes and her unbreakable spirit. In his official report to the High Council, he wrote a simple summary of humanity that would be taught in Velcari schools for generations to come. They are small. They are fragile. They live brief lives in a harsh universe. By every measure, they should have been forgotten long ago. But they refuse to be forgotten. They refuse to surrender. They refuse to accept that anything is impossible. When the universe tells them they cannot win, they simply change the definition of winning. They are the most stubborn, foolish, brave, and remarkable species I have ever encountered. And I believe that as long as they exist, hope exists, for all of us. Far away, among the distant stars, Admiral Katie Morrison stood on her bridge and looked out at the universe that had tried so hard to destroy her people. They were still here. They would always be here. And God help anything that tried to stop them.